Awesome. Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Get Jashed. I'm very, very excited today to have with me Serena Hicks. So I was saying this is the longest introduction because Serena has done so much. So Serena is a fellow PR degree holder. She studied at the University of Texas at Austin and also took summer semester courses at the University of Hawaii at Manoa. Serena's professional career began at MTV News, where her first year was spent working on the 2000 Choose or Lose presidential coverage with Rock the Vote. Has produced some of the MTV True Life documentary series episodes and then moved into the MTV Networks Special Events team, including planning for Dave Chappelle's second season launch party. Serena has worked as the brand integration producer for Stacey London's TLC show and for the Tyra Banks Show, of which Serena won a Daytime Emmy Award. In her time living in New York City for a decade and being back home in Austin, Texas now, Serena has learned a lot in her work for leading companies like MTV News, Broadway Video, which is Lorne Michaels' production company, and the NHL. So Serena is now working for herself as a life and business coach who is all about lighting up those who have their hearts on fire for change, which is a line that I love. I borrowed directly from your website for that because it just lands so well. So thank you so much for joining me all the way from Austin. I'm so glad to have you here. So thank you, Serena.
Thank you for having me. It's so fun for me to be, thinking about dinner shortly and knowing that it is morning in your universe. It's one of those fun, yay, technology moments.
And I've just had brekkie and it's so good. So yeah.
Yes. I will eat later.
Yeah. So I guess there's a lot going on in the world, and these conversations, you could say that, these conversations are around communication and leadership, but obviously we're looking into a different layer of that today. But also around your work as well. So I guess the first question is just what's the feeling there right now for you or collectively?
I think that I'm like, whoa, big question. I think the feelings are, I think everyone, first of all, I just love that we get to have these conversations, especially when we talk about leadership, because I think that one of the interesting things to me right now is everybody's afraid of saying the wrong thing. Like everyone who's not a sociopath, who doesn't actively want to be a dick, is sort of like, I don't want to say the wrong thing and wants to really step back. So I'm excited to get to talk to you about this and for anyone who's listening, because a popular protest chant is silence is violence. And I'm also like, oh, here's where we all get to practice courage, because everyone wants to get it right. But if we wait until we get it right, if we allow that perfectionism into our communications, then we're more likely to cause trouble, or there's room for assumptions. And at the same time, we can talk about, there are some things not to say. All lives matter is not a good lead. So right, we agree. So I feel like it's a really tense time, because I feel like there's a lot of pain and a lot of unprocessed pain and guilt and shame and horror and confusion. And then it just feels like everyone is amped up. And then here in Austin, our police department, has really not shown effective leadership skills. So here's my summary statement. Our police chief traded with the city of Houston, and us in Austin, I think we lost. Our police force has, we have one kid with brain damage because he was shot with a rubber bullet. And I've literally seen the footage, we've all seen it, where he was mostly standing by himself on a hillside area. There's protesters in front of him and behind him, but he's all but by himself, and he just gets shot and falls like a sack of potatoes. And apparently he has brain damage. And, the police are saying whoa, it's rubber bullets. You never know. We have a pregnant woman who was shot with rubber bullets and has had issues. It's tense.
Tense is probably a good word for it.
Yeah. Yeah.
I want to touch on something that you brought up there, because it's something that has been shared in previous interviews that obviously had nothing to do with this topic in itself anyway, but it seems like it's so important right now, is courageous conversations.
Yes.
And I will admit, I'm still afraid, I'm going to screw up. I'm going to say something wrong. And
me too.
But I'm more of a doer than I prefer to do, rather than sit and talk about things over and over again. Talking is definitely important in this scenario as well. but
Yes.
as far as like what is wrong, but I'd rather do and actually just get shit done. So,
Yes.
so that was a part of my process as well. Like when I reached out to you, I'm like, oh, like I'm going to screw up. I mean, I should probably let her know that. But
Yes.
I think that's the understanding as well. And I like how you brought up perfectionism in our communication, in our conversation.
It's what it is, right? Like I'm having the same experience, and so I'm half black and half white. So in so many ways, it has been made very clear to me that there's been an opening and people are wanting to know more about the black experience, and I'm always qualifying. It's a half black experience. It comes complete with a lot of white privilege, but even still, it feels like part of my sacred work, like as a helper, you know, to step forward and use my skills and share my experiences. And at the exact same time, all day, every day, there's a part of my brain that's like, you should step aside, and, you know, you should amplify other black voices, and you're definitely going to say it wrong. And it's interesting, as a coach, we talk about like circumstances are neutral. It's who we decide we want to be. And this is such an extreme example, but it's ultimately like, yeah, someone somewhere is either going to misunderstand me or understand me exactly and hate what I say. The question is that my reason to not show up? Like, is perfectionism my priority, or doing my work, even if only half the people who hear it appreciate it?
Yeah.
Like, you know, which is my priority? Doing it perfect, maybe possibly one day, possibly, or trusting that some people are going to hear exactly what they need. And like, my job is to show up and, you know, attempt to be a vessel.
Yeah.
More than attempt to be perfect or externally validated.
I love that. Like, what is more important, being perfect or actually just doing the work?
Welcome to my brain. This is what I think about and talk about all day for about 10 days now. It's like, shit.
That a lot, because it kind of, it cuts right through, like, and it's okay to have fear.
Yes.
It's okay to acknowledge and be like, oh yeah, I don't know what I'm doing right now, or I don't know.
I'm not perfect.
Yeah, like, you
I'm
know.
going to offend people.
Yeah.
And I don't want to. That's not my goal. And I think especially assuming that most of your audience is non-Black, I hope there's everybody here, but especially for, you know, non-Black people who give a shit and want to be and you know, contributing and a positive impact. It's like, all right, at this point, the good news is many corporations and CEOs have sent out their official "We stand in solidarity, Black Lives Matter." So at this point, you can collect some of those emails if you haven't written your own. And otherwise, there's so many free resources. But I love that I know you're a PR professional, and having worked in communications, my thing is always just, if you just sort of speak your truth right on up with, I've seen so many people post or share starting with, I'm really afraid I'm going to do this wrong, but I can't be silent. You know, I am in solidarity. I'm going to learn. I'm going to grow. Some people explicitly list like what their action items are. Some are just like, I'm new to this, I'm going to get my shit together. But I think that authenticity resonates just in our bodies. So there's a whole different experience there. And I know I saw a post from an acquaintance on Instagram, and it was effectively some version of All Lives Matter. And I was like, hey, you know, here's why we discourage that, because I feel confident in, she didn't actually recognize she was distracting from the real conversation. Like, she really thought it was a contribution. And so it was like, oh, right, because of the authenticity, I felt comfortable sharing with her. I don't want to say correcting her, giving her the option, but like when she heard the option, she was like, no, I don't mean all lives matter as in Black lives don't matter. I understand now Black lives matter is another way of saying all lives matter.
Yeah. And I think it's that opportunity to educate, but also it's vulnerability in which we show up. Like, if we can be vulnerable enough to say, hey, I'm going to screw up, but I'm going to try.
I'm going to show up. Like, you've got to be willing to screw up in order to show up.
That's going to include screwing up, and that's an opportunity to learn.
Right. Because if we're not screwing up, we're not risking anything. And if we're playing it safe, we're, you know, either watering ourselves down or trying to make ourselves more palatable. And otherwise, like, if we're just coming back to a marketing point of view, anytime you're trying to like, I want to be palatable for everyone, you've mostly you just made yourself boring to everyone. And you know, it's like ironic, but authenticity is a good marketing tool and leadership tool, and actually only just requires that we actually show up as our human self.
Exactly. And you've got to risk it to get the biscuit. So
I've never heard that. I love it.
You can use that one.
Totally taking it. Hey, everybody, just so you know, you got to risk it to get a biscuit.
Yeah.
Biscuit is cookie.
Exactly. Yes. Not scone.
Yes.
That actually leads me on to, so in one of your videos that you've shared, I'm going to quote you. So you said, present circumstances are inviting us to be much more creative and powerful with our gifts. And this was in relation to COVID, of course, but I think it's
same.
Pretty much
same.
Can you, well, I think that kind of touches on exactly what we were just sharing about is, you know, like be more creative with how you approach and communicate and say, I'm going to screw up, but show up. But can you elaborate a little bit more on that?
Yes. I feel like it actually, exactly what we're saying about the circumstances are always, I'm going to put in air quotes, neutral, meaning we always have responses to them. And that's one of the ways that I coach is like, we have what we feel about it, but like, if we can like feel our emotions and then allow ourselves to see what we're making it mean isn't necessarily true. Like all of the coolest leaders in society did shit that people didn't necessarily know was possible. And I would offer it's because they weren't attached to like, well, here's what I see. Guess that's all that's possible. If anyone has watched the Michael Jordan documentary series, The Last Dance, it's so good. And it's like, he's crazy in some levels, but he accomplished extraordinary things. And I'm thinking, yeah, because nobody could tell him what he couldn't do. There was one moment where he even talks about, why would I ever worry about missing a shot I haven't taken yet? I just assume it's going to go in. And so bringing that attitude, not just to COVID, but now that we are all having really courageous conversations around race and identity and systematic oppression and like, are we okay with that? We're not okay with that. Well, now what do we do? I think the sort of thread that ties it all together, when we are able to take personal responsibility and not be so reactive, then everything is more of our wake-up call. As in, one of the things that I liked about COVID early, one of the things, but okay, so we're Zooming right now and you can see my cats and you can see the trashed cat condo in the background. And it is what it is. And I don't care because I'm a coach, so I work with Zoom, but I know so many people who are like, you know, much more professional. And prior to COVID and everybody working at home and also trying to teach their kids at home, you know, if your kid ran in the background of the video, it was like, oh no, unprofessional. If your partner was screaming about dinner in the background, it was like something to be embarrassed. Our humanity, like, you know, your professional self was not quite as real and vulnerable and human. And I've sort of loved talking with clients and friends about it. I'm like, well, that shit's out the door. Now everybody knows who has pets, who has kids, who has parents who need care. Like I think there's a sense of humanity that has come through because of the like, yeah, people are trying to work while raising their kids and taking care of their parents and all of it while we're on lockdown and scared. And so then it just feels like, yeah, take it to the nth degree as far as the humanity. And none of us are a monolith. Like the more that we are able to connect as individuals and hear individual stories, and that's where like our greatest conversations and individual experiences are all coming in. I feel like it's helping to dissolve the idea that any one thing, person, color, race, gender, sexuality is like one thing. And I think there's more individuality that's bubbling up, which I'm like, oh, this is our wake-up call. We've been asleep. We've been checking boxes. This means that. And now we're like, no, this just means maybe that, but we get to decide if that's what we want. And if we don't, then we get to change it.
That's it. It's this different level of understanding each other as humans that has come about of like being able to, do Zoom calls or whatever platform you use, and just having that understanding of like the awareness of, well, whatever goes now, because we're in these different circumstances and we are all human. And oh my gosh, we're learning that finally.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And so as it pertains to the shock and horror of waking up to systematic, like racist ideas that we've all been spoon-fed since birth, I think that that's also like to our benefit. I think there has been a coming together. Some people are falling apart, but I would offer some people need to fall apart.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's the whole concept of you can't always save people from rock bottom, because sometimes rock bottom is what is their catalyst to go, oh shit, I need to do something for myself now.
Yep.
Yeah. Oh, it's so good. It's
and I'm like, we're adulting at the next level.
Look at us.
We all came to 2020 like, perfect vision, we're going to have clear sight, it's going to be so fun. And the universe is like, totally. And now we're like, stop it. This is...
Just give me a blankie, please.
Yes, I just want a puppy and $1 million, okay? Stop. It's like, no, this is the waking up moment.
Before we started recording, before we started the interview, we were talking about almost semantics and understanding different meanings of different words, and you've used the word systematic, so I want to bring that in. You've used the word systematic a couple of times when we talk about systematic, like racism or oppression or anything like that, and a lot of people are using the word systemic. So can you, because I understand, but can you explain the difference in choosing your words carefully?
Yes, it's actually one of my favorite topics. So one thing is systemic is almost as if, like, think of a disease that sort of accidentally spread, and that's systemic. And systematic is very organized, very thoughtfully, intentionally done. And Jess, as you were saying, we both watched the documentary 13th, which explains how when slavery was abolished in the United States, the 13th Amendment said, like, okay, no more slaves. Everyone has the same rights unless you are a criminal, at which point the freed slaves were often arrested for things like loitering. In case you're like, isn't loitering just standing? The answer is yes. And remember, the slave South had whites only. So let's just be clear. I'm sure there were all sorts of like, oh, you didn't know you were standing in a whites only space? Too bad, you are now arrested, stripped of your rights. Sorry about the generational poverty, lack of having you home, like all of the generational impacts. That's not the right word, but like it's, got a ripple out effect. But I think people like to forget that, it was illegal for slaves in the United States to know how to read. So like when slaves were set free, some of them had learned how to read through magic, like literally, there's always an exception, but then it's like, oh, you can't have this job unless you can read. You can't read, too bad. I think people forget that the system was set up to serve and protect wealthy white people mostly in our country. And that's where systematic, as in, this is not an accident, my friends. And the good news is we can dismantle it.
Yeah.
Sort of like, like it's like a computer. I don't do computers, but you can take them apart. It's not a thing. And then also when you talk about words matter, something that I always notice is how very quickly, historically, peaceful protests, any one thing goes out of place and the news reports and people on Facebook start talking about rioters and looters. And it's so interesting to me because I'm like, I prefer to call it an uprising, which I noticed you said earlier before we were recording. And I was like, yes, that's what I like to call it as well. It's an uprising. It's an uprising. It's, but you listen to the news and they're like riots and looting and it's so, I'm always pointing out, like, whenever one of our sports teams over here in America wins, there's always insanity, literally riots in the street. You'll see kids jumping on top of a vehicle that they flipped over and setting fire on stuff. And ESPN reports on that, like, oh, everyone's having too much fun in this city. They just won the Super Bowl or whatever. And it's all fun and games. And yet we have peaceful protests and we have cops out in full riot gear. And the terminology that comes forward, the dog whistles as in like the not so well coded about law and order and like, well, these thugs, and like, what is thug if not meant to bring up an image of, a poor, dangerous Black person? And so it's so like, can we just be mindful of our words and ask ourselves why the second it's people of color, even peaceful protesting, the cops have to come out in their adversary riot gear? And why, like, everybody's aware that we had the Women's March and we had our like hot pink pussy hats on. Not a lot of riot gear. Not a lot of riot gear. Mostly white women. Not a lot of riot gear. Cops were just there like chilling. So I think it's so interesting that, it's like funny how that is.
I hear the word systematic as being on purpose.
Yes.
Yeah, and I talk a lot about, like, in my work, I talk a lot about being on purpose. So systematic doesn't actually have to be. So this is where semantics comes in, which is really interesting, because systematic doesn't have to be negative. We can be systematic in our being on purpose to dismantle and to change and to learn and to grow or to do what we need to do, right?
Yes, we call that anti-racism work. I only learned that word like literally 3 or 4 weeks ago. I'm going to hold it up for you. I'm like, hold on, I've got the book right here.
Yes.
Yes.
Is this the, you go, continue, keep talking.
is,
I was looking for that book yesterday.
oh, I ordered it weeks ago, which is the only reason I have it in my hot little hands, because Amazon sold out and I'm not a Kindle person. But
It's
actually,
now, I think.
yes, it was just so fun. I love that. At least the other day I was looking, it's like the top 14 books on all of Amazon's book sales are ultimately about anti-racism and dismantling white supremacy. So
And there's
good
a
on us.
Brown episode on her podcast.
Mm-hmm.
She's amazing. I love her. But she was interviewing Ibram Kendi and
Mm-hmm.
about the book and about his work and everything like that. And I was listening to that in place of reading the book. And it's just so, it is just so interesting. And I get that sense of on purposeness again.
Yes.
Yeah. But I did want to ask you, that was my next part about that. So going back to your quote about being much more creative and powerful with our gifts, you've created and released a new offering, the Antiracism School, which is basically coaching, right? Of like this, and a safe space to explore.
Yes. Thank you. I'm like, safe space is the first thing.
Yeah.
Yes, because there's so much, and there's so many leaders to follow. There's start, if anyone who's listening, with how to be anti-racist, it's Ibram X Kendi. So like, start there. And there's so many free resources, and so many of our leaders are for sure leading the way. So it's not that I'm going to introduce everyone to, that so much as I think, especially as people are confronting and working on their internalized racism, the brain, and as a coach, and I work, with mindset, the thoughts that come up is like, yeah, but that's not me, or, well, this isn't my fault, or any of the normal, but it's not always that way. And so that's where I was like, ooh, I want a coaching container so that people can bring those questions to me. By the way, they're paying me, I charge for the course. So the idea is like, yes, so a concept that hopefully is not brand new to all of your listeners, but historically, a lot of Black and Indigenous and people of color have done a lot of free emotional labor.
Yes.
So even I was at an appointment not so long ago, and the woman I was talking with was like, I had this one Black friend, and I called him and I was like, is this real? Have you ever been pulled over? And we talked for like an hour, and I kept asking him questions, and I'm like, no, that's free emotional labor. Yeah. And I don't know how close they are, but I do know that speaking with some of my friends, they're like, yes, I've received all of these. Can you validate your experience? Is it true? Phone calls, which is traumatizing and taxing and exhausting. And so that's where I was like, oh, I can hold this space. I am going to forever be doing my anti-racist work as a half Black, half white woman. And I know that if you start like in the first chapter of how to be anti-racist, Kendi talks about, ultimately, he gave a speech once as a young Black man that was ultimately criticizing the Black community. And he's like, I'm so ashamed of this, but like, racism is spoon-fed to all of us, including Black and brown people. There is a sense of self-rejection that it helps to confront and dismantle your racism, no matter who you are. And I think as a coach, and also I hope and I think, but like a truth teller, that's where I wanted to create this online space so that people could just bring the questions and we can coach on them, and other people can hear that all of these questions are normal and same. Everyone's scared of saying the wrong thing. Everyone's scared they're going to be misunderstood and like, deragged. Everyone is scared that like, maybe if I just like freeze and hide, it'll all sort of blow over, but also everyone wants to contribute, and everyone then gets overwhelmed. Like, where do I begin? Do I have to read 45 books and get a certificate before I can start? No. And so that is why I created the container for the community and the coaching. And then also some like essential education as far as like, let's get everyone up to speed so that, my desire is that it's a 6-week online only course. And my desire is that people are going to walk away crystal clear and confident in their ability to be an anti-racist human. Doesn't mean, oh, now you've got a certificate and you're perfect. There's no certificate, but crystal clear and confident in way, not just like, oh, sure, I read that one book and then I freaked out because I got overwhelmed and I didn't know how to process my feelings. That's the container that I'm excited to hold space for, is like, come ask the questions. Everyone in this space is in this space having paid money and shown up to be like, I am here to be a part of the anti-racist healing. So from that container, how do we do it? How do we move forward? And then some, I'm all shrug, and then some teaching, because I definitely am like, listen, it helps to know where, how we got here is actually a key component. We can coach as far as what's next, but we do need to know a little bit about how we got here, and also how everyone involved can be a leader in their community, because I know that you're a leader, and I know people who are listening are talking about leadership, but I know that sometimes when we feel like we're alone in our community and how we're serving, it's really important to feel like we have, even if it's just online, a community of other people who are like with us. Because if you're the first person speaking up in your company, especially if we're talking as a white person or a non-Black person and saying, hey, I want to talk about Black Lives Matter, it can feel lonely and intimidating. And so this safe space is not just for questions and coaching and learning, it's also actual community for people who are like, I am anti-racist. Anti-racism is a practice. It's not like a box we get to check. But yeah, I want it to be that safe space at this time, because I've definitely caught on that apparently I have a very well curated Facebook feed, lucky me, but that is not everyone's experience. And especially for people who are like the first person who's like, hey, we're going to be anti-racist now in their family or in their business or in their community, having actual strong real-time support with other people who are like, yes, me too, keep going, I think is the difference between having good intentions and burning out versus having good intentions and being like, all right, this is a marathon. I'm gonna get me some good training shoes. I'm gonna hire me a coach. I'm gonna practice with a running group. That's the plan.
Yeah. And I think that makes a difference because when you dismantle old ideologies, when you are looking at new ways of leadership, when there's such an existing way of being as humans, a community, like, for safety, we need to be accepted by those around us, right? So it can feel, and I think it's okay that it feels confronting and scary to be
terrifying.
To be like, hey, actually, I don't love this. Can we talk about this? Because you're risking
relationships and money. And we live in capitalist societies. And that's where, as we talked about, courage is so important. More and more people are attracted to authenticity and truth, and more of us give a shit and want to be good humans to everyone than otherwise.
Yeah.
But scarcity mindset will come flying through the door when you, as a business owner or an entrepreneur or just a person who is, it's like anytime we show up, literally show up, we understand that someone somewhere may critique and or try to cause us financial harm. And that's a very human thing to like want to avoid conflict.
Yeah.
And yet silence is a form of violence. So, so it's like, all right, everyone, let's find our words as best we can.
Yeah, I love how you said that anti-racism is like doing, because as you were sharing about it, I'm like, yeah, it's like, I always talk about how love is a verb. It's not just noun. It's like it's a continual action. It's a continual choice. And I think there's no medals for saying like, I'm anti-racist. It's more about just continually putting in and trying, just at least trying, and learning and growing.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. I think that's actually a really great analogy.
So what role, when we talk about uprising, because I know that you use that word as well, and it is a really powerful word because it, again, semantics, it sort of brings up the image of a very different image than other words.
Yes.
What role do you feel like leadership plays or can play in?
I'm actually so glad you asked that. I think that one of the biggest roles leaders play, whether you've got a fancy title at a company or you're a stay-at-home mom and, running the show, like whatever it is signaling that this is okay. And by signaling that, like, for me, the Black Lives Matter movement is actually like how we're all going to collectively heal. Or die trying, I don't know. But I definitely think it's a step forward. And for that, it's the like, signaling is just that, the term, just signaling, I'm on board with this. I'm in solidarity with my Black brothers and sisters. I'm getting educated. I'm trying to figure out how to be an anti-racist human. Like, this is moving forward. And there's a video that I will definitely be sharing in the course that just shows, it's an old video, it's on YouTube, but it's just showing how like movements happen. And it's like, there's always a leader or two, but the movements don't start with those leaders. It's the first few followers that signal to everyone else, this is okay. And then everything goes right. It's the same, like we talk about it in sales or whatever they're called. What is it? The early adapters.
Yeah.
I'm not one of them. My partner is, that's not me. So like moves quickly. And, then there's the few other people who want to be on trend. So they get involved. So as it pertains to leadership, why I think it's important to signal solidarity and, not just a desire, but an actual commitment to take action and do the things that are like, hey, I'm about to live me my best anti-racist life, it signals to other people in your community and people you'll never know that you are on board with that, and that this is what's important to you, because part of our human nature is following. And so if everyone's being quiet, if nobody's signaling that they also stand for equal rights for everyone, then it's too easy to be worried that you're the dreamer, that you're the only one who wants that. And that's part of why we say, like, a phrase that I've loved forever is silence always favors the oppressor.
Yes.
Because it's like, once a few people, if you think of the Me Too movement, once people started speaking up, there was a whole wave of other people who were like, yeah, me too.
Yeah, same. Yeah.
Yes. And it's like, that's the bad news. The good news is, once everyone realized, whoa, it wasn't just me.
Yeah.
I didn't deserve it.
There's such a healing in understanding that our experiences or our desires and our wants aren't necessarily, like, we're not alone all the time as much as we think we are.
Yes, exactly that.
Yeah. Okay, so last question is something that I ask everyone. Well, it's kind of a multi-part question, but where do you feel like you get communication and leadership really right? Even if it's a practice, like knowing that it is a practice rather than that moment, that tick the box. Where do you feel like you get it really right?
Oh, my brain loves to tell me where I get it wrong. So hold on. Where do I get it right? Right. I'm like, okay, good. Well, I got a lot of answers there. I think I get it right. I think that in communications, the things that I'm most proud of are my most vulnerable shares. And like, I always know, so I don't email my list that often. Like, just talk on social media, and that's sort of how I connect with my clients, my friends, and some family. And so I always know I'm on the right track when I'm like, I really don't want to do this. And like, I check it and realize, like, it's not my ego begging. It's not this. It's I don't want to do this because it's showing more of me than I'm comfortable with. And so I think I'm good at being vulnerable and brave sometimes in that way, because the idea is that it lights the way for other people.
It leads
so
by,
it
gives other people
yeah they can see themselves in me, and that it gives them permission to be human.
That's beautiful. And then the question is, where do you feel like there's, I'm not going to say wrong, but where do you feel like there's room for improvement for you?
There is room for improvement, and it is literally top of mind in my business planning. To be more consistent, at this time I allow myself the insecure indulgence of like, oh, I wrote something yesterday, I don't need to share again for at least 3 or 4 more days. And I think as a leader, I would offer exponentially more value to my community if I just like legit was like, we do 5 posts a week. We write them all on Monday. We write them once a day. We write them all on I don't care. But that is the next level of my maturity as a leader, is to commit. It's almost like I'm thinking of marathon training. Like, you don't just get to, I ran 1 marathon, but you know what I mean? You got to get your training runs in. They don't have to be fast. They don't have to be perfect. But that's where I am committed to growing as a contributor and person and coach, is not just when I feel like it, but on a much more regular basis, because that's also what I tell my clients to do. So like, all right, I'll take my own medicine. Fine.
And very last question. I know we've spoken a lot about this, but if you could summarize it in however long you want to, where do you feel like there's room for improvement in the world in communication and leadership, in summary?
I'm going to think about this for 1 second. I don't know. I think that's part of why I'm getting really excited. I'm seeing more and more of this, a willingness to show up imperfectly. And I'm not trying to celebrate. I'm saying, like, for example, I am leading my How to Be Anti-Racist school from a very human space. I don't have this covered. I haven't studied it for 45 years. I am teaching, mostly holding the space and coaching. But like, to be clear, I'm coming in as a leader, not some perfect creature. And I feel like I've seen so much more of that from our business leaders, certainly from our thought leaders and our artists who always lead, but really with a sense of, oh shit, I am dismantling my internalized racism. Um, I won't bother naming exact names, but like, you know, there's a coach who I followed for 100 years who's like, I totally screwed up, but like the level of apology, it doesn't feel scripted. It's that like, oh no, she's had a full time out. She's really owning her space of, I have to work on this. I didn't realize that I wanted. And so I think how leaders are showing up lately, the true leaders, and including ones who I'm like, they suck, is not having all the answers. Not like, okay, I did the 10-year plan, I got it, everybody. Like, that ship has sailed.
Yeah.
We're all just wayfinders on a big fucking choppy ocean right now. So anyone who's like, I know the exact way, like, lies. We're figuring it out.
Yeah, it's the best visual of just like this choppy as fuck ocean, and it's like, yeah, we're all just here.
Wayfinders together.
Yeah, cool. Is there anything else you feel like there's important to share or say?
Yeah, Black Lives Matter. My closing thoughts are,
yes.
Thank you to all who are waking up and suddenly like, yeah, fuck yeah, like Black Lives Matter. I fundamentally think our collective pain is our portal, if we'll allow it to be like the doorway that we walk through to like come together, not as a delightful illusion or nicety to say, but as humans who take care of each other in ways that, you know, our brains couldn't really fathom 2 million years ago.
That gives me hope. That fills me with like this sense of hope and like, okay, like we can do, like, you know, like we can
cool. We can do it. Not to sound too cheesy, but I'm like, no, that we've never gotten this far together before. So like, let's use our tools, let's use all of our brilliance, and let's crack this nut before the aliens come.
Exactly. Thank you so much for your time this morning or today, Serena. I really, really appreciate you joining here and coming on and having this conversation with me. I feel like it's so important, but I'm extra, extra grateful just for your energy and your time and your wisdom and everything that you have to share as well. So thank you so, so much. If you are interested in any of Serena's work, she'll be tagged the shit out of it in this video, wherever you find it. You can go follow her and find the links there. But yeah, thank you so much for your time. I really, really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me, Jess. This was fun.